everybody, it's Natalie Barnes and Stitch the dog here. Welcome to the very first episode of Stitch. You thought we named it Stitch because of quilting. We named it after the dog. Listen, the dog's taken me on my 3-mile walk. I've had my 3 cups of coffee, but there are still dishes in the sink. Doesn't matter, we've got new fabric to cut into, and you know what they say, go big or go home. So for our first episode, we are going to make a big quilt out of big blocks made of big pieces. I've got Amy Gibson Merriweather here, and I've got Annabelle Wrigley daisy chain, both from Windham Fabrics. I'm going to press these, sort them according to lights and darks, and we're going to get started. Welcome to Stitch. There are only 3 dimensions that you need to remember, and they are 6.5-inch squares, 4-inch squares for your lights and darks to make the half-square triangles, and finally you'll need 3.5-inch squares for snowballing or dog-earing those 6.5-inch squares that you cut. That's all. 6.5-inch, 4-inch, and 3.5. Okay, phew, I'm back. That was a marathon. I think I had maybe half-yard pieces of Merriweather and a whole fat quarter bundle of daisy chain. So those are all pressed and I've cut them. We have, because this is such a scrappy quilt, we have a color recipe. So I'm going to use a center block. I'm going to use 4 around for the points and 4 around for the outside corners. And then we're going to use a mixture of lights and darks for the little half-square triangles that go all the way around. Now, cutting those half-square triangles, may I just say we have 24 per block times 9 if you want to make the larger quilt, and that is 24 times 9, 24 times. Look, I don't have to do math like that. I'm a quilter. I only deal in fractions. If it's not 1/4 of an inch, I'm not doing the math. But in reality, it is 9 of these centers, 72 of the large points, 108 dark and 108 light to make the half-square triangles, 36 of the little squares in the corner, and 144 of, what are the 100? Oh, the things that we use for the snowballs, the little 3.5-inch squares. Don't worry, you didn't have to write that down. Everything's going to be in the link in the description. Where to find the fabric is also going to be in the link in the description. So let's get started. In this situation, I've got these split up. Here's my center block, and I've got my dark and my corners. I've got my 3.5-inch squares to snowball. What I mean by snowballing is we're going to put right sides together, and we're going to sew from point to point. So if that's not something you can eyeball, and if you don't want to put that line from corner to corner with a light, soft pencil, then I suggest a Jenny Doan method, which is folding them in half. Now, because there's so many of them, I took them to my ironing board and I pressed them all in half. So we've got a bunch of these that we're going to use, which are all of our lights, and we've taken them to the pressing mat and pressed them all in half. So this will give us that line without having to draw a line on each and every one of those triangles. The first one's going to go on. I've got an example here. You're going to flip it over to make sure that it covers, and then you're going to trim the back. The second one right here is going to sew here, and it's going to overlap. You're going to flip that over to make sure that it covers, and if it does, then you're just going to take your rotary cutter, trim that off, and you will have your dog-eared point. We're also going to use the second set of fabrics and dog-ear each of the corners. So again, we're going to place this on the outside edge here, lining these up, flip it over to make sure that it covers, and then trim this excess off. We're going to do that on both sides. So you will have a block that ends up looking like this. Last but not least, we need to make some half-square triangles. For this project, and for most of the projects, now that I think about it, I use a method which is the go bigger and trim. So I've cut lights and darks 4 inches square. I'm going to put these right sides together, and again, for 108 of these, I am not going to draw a pencil line down the center. I'm actually going to fold this and press it. Once that's done, I'm going to start chain piecing, and I'm going to chain piece 1/4 inch on one side and 1/4 inch on the other side. I've got these as an example so you can see I haven't even cut them apart. I've got loads and loads and loads of these, loads and loads and loads of these, and loads and loads and loads of these. I know we only have an 8-minute attention span, but I'm going to show you what I do here. I have a leader here. I have what I call headers and footers. I'm going to run this through my machine and pick up with my 1/4 inch seam allowance on one side here, and I'm just going to keep chain stitching. This is a good place for a good movie or podcast because we need, how many of these? Oh, we didn't do the math. That's right. So once all of these are done, you're going to have a chain like this. Go back to your mat, take your rotary cutter, cut these into 2, so you will have 2 half square triangles. Now, press to the dark side, and you won't have as big of a shadow behind your fabrics. I'm a nester. I nest my seams, so I don't very often press open. So we're going to press to the darker side here, press to the dark side, and we're going to make, how many of these again? Was it, oh, that's right, 26 for each block times 9 blocks. That's 26 times 9. Okay, you go figure the math. Last but not least, what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim all of these. But I'm going to trim all of these to 3.5 inches square. I always say that it doesn't matter where you put your time in on your project. Oh, I love this. I think I'm going to do a little. It doesn't matter where you put your time in on your project. You can put it in pinning and making sure that every seam is correct and that you've got your actual 1/4 inch and ripping and then sewing it again. Or you can put your time in trimming everything accurately and then just sewing right through it. You'll end up with perfect, perfect half square triangles. The last thing I want to show you is what happens when you sew these perfect half square triangles together. You will go right down this 1/4 inch seam here, make that a scant 1/4 inch seam, and you will find that there's a little place where the threads are crossing. That's your seam allowance. That's where you're going to want to sew. Now, if I were to sew this to one side or the other, there would be a lot of bulk in the top here. So this is one of those instances where these center seams I'm going to press open. When I press them open, you'll find that same little sewing guide right at the tip. And when I turn this over, you'll see that we've got a perfect 1/4 inch allowance at each of those little points. You're going to make elements that go on side, side, and then top, bottom. I've got a gajillion half square triangles to trim, so I'll see you back here to show you the final results. These pieces are going to end up right around here to make our little points. If this is too scrappy for you, just substitute a solid fabric for all of those lights. Me, I like my quilts a little chunky, and I'm going for that old-fashioned look. But remember, we cleaned it up by coming up with an actual color recipe for the large blocks. Here's that seam that shows where your 1/4 inch is. And here's what that point will look like once your seam is pressed open. Okay, may I just say that was a lot of trimming of half square triangles. Remember, we made a 9 patch that looked like this. Then, with all of our half square triangles, we've made 2 short rows and 2 long rows. These are going to go around the 9 patch, and I'm just going to sew this up really quickly right now. I've been busy sewing all of the other blocks, so I'm just going to give this a real quick little sew right here. Remember, we talked about where to sew so that you've got perfect points on these little half square triangles. So here we go. Oh, you know the old saying. Desire to complete a project is directly proportionate to the amount of thread left in your bobbin. Well, we certainly have that situation here. Well, forget that. Just pretend that I had a full bobbin and that I finished that one, and it looks like this, which is really a lovely little mosh-up of these two different designers' fabrics. This is Amy Gibson and Annabelle Wrigley. Let me show you how two of these blocks go together. I think you're going to like the secondary pattern. I love it. Here are the first two of these blocks put together, and you can see right in the middle there's that secondary pattern that's occurring. Oh, where'd she go? Oh, there she is. Where'd she go? Anyway, I'm going to finish up this last block, put these four together, and we'll end up with a nice little quilt for the holidays. Or I'll see if my girlfriend will finish the other blocks for me and we can do a little team quilting. How many of you team quilt? Somebody sews, somebody irons, somebody does the top, somebody does the quilting. We all do it, right? Especially during the holidays to get everything ready. So I'll be right back and we'll have a finished top here. Last but not least, a little bit of Merriweather and a little bit of daisy chain from Windham Fabrics. Remember, you can find this free pattern in the description below, and you'll also find a link to all the different shops around the United States that purchase these lines. One may be close by, so please visit your local quilt shop. I'm going to see if my girlfriend wants to team sew with me. Otherwise, this quilt is done, and it's a wrap. Thanks again for joining me. If you're interested in more tips, like that one about your bobbin, please subscribe. We'll be visiting soon, and with the holidays coming up, it'll be good to have a few free patterns under your belt. You never know when you may need a hostess gift. Happy holidays, happy Thanksgiving, from my house to yours. Bye-bye. Enough bobbins to do the project. Oh, wind enough bobbins to do the project. Like I said, we don't know how to do it any other way. We're keeping it real. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.